Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at thechangeleader.com. Changing Higher Ed is sponsored by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. With their cloud solution for higher education, Blackbaud connects thousands of campuses worldwide. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience. And now, here's your host, Drum McNaughton.
Our guest today is Dr. Ralph Enlow, who serves as president of the Association of Biblical Higher Education, a network of over 150 North American member and affiliate colleges that emphasize deep Bible engagement and spiritual development in community that helps students answer God's call to live life, whether that be in the marketplace or in the ministry. Dr. Enlow has a long history of involvement in theological higher education. Before taking the reins at ABHE, he served at Columbia University for 28 years, including 6 as its provost. He's also been a consultant, institutional self-study director, accreditation team chair, and he chairs ABHE's Commission on Accreditation. He's here today to speak with us about the future of Christian higher ed and what presidents should be and need to be doing now to ensure sustainability of their institutions. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Drum. My pleasure.
I've been looking forward to having you on the show for a while. We met a few weeks ago at your Association for Biblical Higher Education annual meeting. What a great conference that was. Thank you and Dave Metters for putting on such a wonderful opportunity to meet people and learn.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you being there and contributing to our members. And we're looking forward to deeper engagement with you as we go forward.
Well, so am I. So let's get started. Got a lot of things to go with you, really taking a good look at the state of Christian higher education. I mean, it's a big subset of the overall higher education. And you guys are facing a lot of challenges right now, just like everybody else is. I'd like to start off with a study that you conducted back in 2017 that highlighted a number of critical things Christian colleges and university must do to remain or become sustainable. Part of that was you looked at the changing factors in Christian institutions. Could you talk a little bit to some of those factors, please?
Sure. Again, this was a study that we did in collaboration with the Barna Group. It was a major research project, and our interest there was to try to understand more about the marketplace and the dynamics for our member institutions and what kinds of perceptions are out there, what kinds of developments and factors. And you specifically mentioned one of the things that was part of the background and that we took a look at in this research was some of the major shifts that are occurring. And certainly you would be aware that there are pretty radical demographic shifts occurring at our time. In terms of race and ethnicity, for example, we anticipate that white or Caucasian majority within 15 years will be less than a majority, well less than a majority in the United States. African Americans will remain about the same percentage-wise, about 12% of the population. Asian population percentage will double from about 3 to 6%. And the biggest growth is going to be in the Hispanic population, which is going to be the largest of the pluralities that are there. So there's not going to be a single majority ethnicity within just a couple decades in North America. Beyond that, we have a pretty big shift in the landscape of Christianity. It used to be a fairly accurate statement to say America's a Christian nation if what you mean is that on a survey or whatever, and people were asked, if they were asked, identify your religious affiliation, about 75% of Americans would have said Christian. And researchers, people like Pew and others, Gallup and so on, have more or less clarified that when people answer those questions, they really fall into one of three primary categories as Christians. They're sort of what you might call convictional Christians. These are people who are defined by their belief and their behaviors in terms of they have a certain set of convictional beliefs that they have about Christianity and about the Bible and so on. And then they are very regular in their church attendance and participation and those kinds of things. They would be called convictional Christians. And then you have what sometimes are termed casual Christians. These are people that show up in church on Christmas and New Year or whatever. Some people call them Christians because it's Christmas and Easter. Christians. And then there's the cultural Christians. That basic group is people that would be, if you ask them on a survey, identify your religious affiliation, they would say we're Christian, but that's because they're American. I mean, they just see themselves as, well, we're not nothing, we're not Catholic, we're not we're not Jewish, we're not Muslim or whatever, we must be Christian. Well, that's been about 75% of Americans in equal proportion, more or less. So about 25% convictional, 25% casual, 25% cultural. That's been true for a while. What we're seeing now is a pretty big erosion of that coalition in two ways. First of all, there's an increase of movement away from casual and cultural in the direction of what some have called the nones. That is, people that identify themselves as having no religious affiliation. So rather than by default, they say, I'm a Christian, they would say, no, I don't have any religious affiliation.
So you don't mean none like with the habit, do you?
No, like NONES. Yeah. No, this is when it comes to answering, do you have a religious affiliation? They would check the box that says none.
Yeah. I would guess that a lot of those folks tend to be, they're not so much atheist or agnostic,
right,
as they tend to say they're much more spiritual.
That's right. Yeah. There's no erosion in the sense of people's interest in spiritual things in North America. That, in fact, some say it's even more intensified. So there's an interest in spirituality, but in terms of identification with the church as an institution, that's significantly eroding.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that if you take those three categories, convictional, casual, cultural, the convictional group is not eroding. That's staying pretty steady at 25%. In fact, it's over the last 25 or 30 years, it's actually grown just a little bit. So, but the other interesting factor is that it used to be in fairly recent history that from the standpoint of cultural and political coalitions, the convictional and casual and cultural Christians tended to align culturally and politically and pretty much be a voting bloc. So that you could say that America was predominantly Christian, not only in terms of identification, but in terms of ideology and in terms of political orientation and affinity and those kinds of things. And actually what's happening now is that there's sort of a divergence between those who are convictional Christians and the rest of Americans. Convictional Christians are now a cultural minority. They're not the mainstream. They're marginalized. So now you've got a coalition between the casual and the cultural Christians and the nones, if you will, or the others. And they tend to be more of an ideological affinity group, whereas the convictional Christians are sort of non-mainstream, sort of a minority marginalized group. So that's a significant demographic shift.
And I would say that with so many Christian colleges and universities focusing on the traditional student,
right,
and with the demographic shifts coming, we all know about the cliff, and last guest that I had on the show, Bill Connolly, who's the vice president for enrollment management at Bucknell, talked directly about that. With those demographic numbers going down, it's requiring Christian colleges and universities to shift over to a different demographic, post-traditional,
Mhm.
i.e., students who are not, right out of high school, but they're more than 24 to 70 years old.
That's right.
There's also a shift in the way that expectations that businesses, parents, and prospective students have. Many Christian universities are liberal arts type institutions. And there's a perception, not necessarily true, that these universities are not doing a good job in preparing students for their
Mhm.
first job or their first career. What changes are you seeing that both amplify this, as well as you see how universities are shifting to make this change?
Yeah, the traditional historic liberal arts ideal is what the Yale report of 1828 called the discipline and furniture of the mind.
Hmm.
In other words, the fundamental purpose of post-secondary education is to give you a sense of intellectual rigor, critical thinking skills, and so on, and to give you the intellectual fodder, if you will, that makes you capable of functioning highly and contributing significantly in a variety of different situations. And that was the historic ideal of liberal education. In reality, particularly since World War II, higher education has become more and more a preparation for job and career, and less pure liberal arts. So that the majority of institutions that would historically be identified as liberal arts institutions really are professional colleges. The majority of their students are enrolled in majors that lead to professions. It used to be sort of anathema that a liberal arts college would offer, for example, a teacher education degree. That's not liberal arts. That's tantamount to vocational education. But the reality on the ground is that even the majority of so-called liberal arts colleges are dominated in their student enrollment programming in areas like business, teacher education, sociology, and really, so again, professional or pre-professional education programs. Even the hard sciences are being displaced by pre-professional programs. So you've got pre-medicine rather than strictly biology or whatever. So yeah, that's a huge trend. And our Christian colleges, probably because Christian colleges have always been a little bit more pragmatic, and of necessity, they tend to be smaller, so they become much more pragmatic. They're probably even more professional colleges than maybe some of the historic, real blue-blooded liberal arts colleges have been. Although, again, you even look at Ivy League, and that's changing.
Very much so. And what I am seeing with many Christian colleges is that very thing, that they're, instead of focusing on teaching the Bible
Mm-hmm.
and that being the major,
Right.
what they're doing is they're major in business with a minor in Bible or a minor in something else.
Yeah.
But part of, at the Naval Academy, what we used to call the bull classes,
Yeah.
your English, political science, etc.
Yeah.
Those tend to be more Bible focused than they would be otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. So in our particular sector, which, the historic shorthand for Bible college was, we prepare people for vocational Christian ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really meant was, we prepare people for church occupations. So if you're preparing people to be pastors and missionaries and things like that, then of course Bible is a huge part of their preparation portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
Less so if you're preparing people to be marketplace oriented in terms of their career. So if they're going to become a public school teacher, yeah, Bible would be a foundation and enrichment for their curriculum, but it wouldn't be that the requirement for them to have biblical and theological substance and proficiency of a high volume would not be the same. So there's been this modification, if you will, this change, this shift in terms of the place of Bible in the curriculum, and all of our colleges, I say all, many of our colleges are becoming more occupational or professional colleges, in the sense that they're not only preparing people for ministerial occupations, but also for marketplace helping professions, if I can put it that way. And that's a significant piece of their curriculum.
And that makes perfect sense, because as the expectations shift, the deliverer of services need to shift as well. I'm also seeing some things along the lines that delivery systems, given that the demographics are changing and folks are going back to school later to complete, or they want, a new job or a promotion or more pay.
Yeah.
The delivery systems have shifted over to online, distributed, blended type education. And how does this reconcile with Christian universities? I know many of them are moving in that direction, but I'm not seeing that it's moving quickly enough. Mm. And I think a lot of folks are starting to struggle financially because of it.
Yeah, I think there's been two ways in which our sector and Christian higher education in general has been reluctant. One is this sort of sense that education is inherently formational, it's incarnational, so it's life on life, it's community, it's life in community, and so on. And so education is not simply a matter of transmission, that is, getting knowledge from one repository to another, but it's really transformational. And the only medium through which transformation can really occur is the traditional classroom. So there's been that predominant mindset that's dominated a lot of Christian education. And then secondly, just the startup cost and the proficiency deficit in terms of mastering new technology delivery platforms and so on and so forth. There's a lot of capital investment that's involved in that, not only in the equipment itself, but in the professional development realm and so on. So you've got those two things that our colleges have been, maybe some colleges have been slow on the uptake there. Having said that, I do believe, and I think we share this view, Drum, that given the demographic realities and given the nature of the perception of how people are going to perceive the purpose of higher education and how they're going to access higher education, we have to diversify our delivery modalities. And the colleges that are reluctant or refusing to diversify their delivery modalities are going to have a very narrow bandwidth in terms of who it is that they're going to be able to serve. But the success rate for most of our colleges is they're going to have to think about students. Somebody invented the term hacking education, and I think there's a lot to be said for understanding that concept, that basically students and parents are approaching education like hackers, and they're looking for the simplest, shortest, most convenient path to reaching their goals, not to completing your curriculum. And so the schools that understand that and can diversify their delivery channels and make them seamless and interchangeable are the ones that are going to be the most effective.
Yeah, we're seeing that quite a bit as well with the advent of micro-credentials,
yes,
stackable certificates that will lead to degree programs. I'm surprised there are quite a few folks out there who are not doing this. It seems to me almost a no-brainer. I mean, Arizona State is the poster child for this, creating relationships with businesses like Starbucks. And it's almost as though folks are going to a job, or it may be the new model. I haven't quite seen enough of it to say, yes, it is.
Right.
But the new model being folks start a job and they have their employer pay for their education, or at least co-pay it. That plus the stackable certificates where folks can go to school online and they can get a certificate in a particular area, whether it's, cybersecurity, whether it be marketing, whatever that area is, and take multiple certificates that ultimately lead to a degree. Because as we all know, the degree really is the ticket to get yourself a well-paying job. I don't see that ever changing. But what I do see changing is how that degree is attained, as well as who's going for it.
Yeah, even in our sector of church ministry leadership preparation, okay? So if our sector, our little narrow sector of higher education is primarily preparing church ministry leadership, I think historically the way that sort of played itself out was calling and schooling and credentialing and service in that order. I feel like I'm called to the ministry. I know I need to go to get schooling. I need to get credentialed as a minister. Then I start serving in ministry. I don't think that's the pattern anymore. The pattern now is serving in a church. Out of that service develops a sense of calling. Out of that calling develops a sense of the need for education or some kind of schooling or training, and then maybe credentialing, maybe not, because credentialing is, and if it is credentialing, it's at more of a competency rather than a licensing level. So, and we see this pattern in the mega churches now. They're basically growing their own staff who start by serving in the church. Out of that sense of serving, there's this reciprocated sense of calling. I'm starting to feel called, and people are looking at me and saying, you know what, we think God has gifted and called you. We think you need to move into a higher and more substantial level of ministry and that's vocational. And then comes the training that's tailored for that particular situation. Our schools need to quit seeing that as a threat and see it as an opportunity. It is a threat to their conventional model of full-time schooling, but it's not a threat to their mission. It's actually a vehicle for their mission.
It is, and given the environment in which we all live and operate, how much money it takes to go to school, to live, it makes much more sense to me anyway that someone would work as well as go to school on a part-time basis to gain the skills and knowledge that they need to be effective.
Right. And of course, that goes back to the discussion of business model. Our traditional business model is based on residential education. When I was in an institutional setting, the only positive cash flow activity we had in the institution was student housing. And so the business model was heavily predicated on high residential student enrollment. That's not a business model that'll work anymore. We have to come up with a business model that funds what we need to do based on a different set of assumptions about enrollment patterns and so on. And of course, in some ways, the overhead is lower in these new opportunity areas. And there is a chance for us to have a very positive business. The other thing about the current business or the traditional business model is it assumed the need for a lot of subsidy. Again, the typical college, at best, 70% of a student's education is funded by tuition and fees. And 30% of it has to be funded by gift income or something, or loans or something. In these other modalities, that doesn't have to be the case. There doesn't have to be huge gift subsidy and so on if it's done right.
That's so true. And with all these shifts that have taken place, what do Christian college and university presidents need to do to assure sustainability for their institutions in the next 10 years?
Well, there's a whole list there, but I think, first of all, they need to get out of Title IV dependency. Title IV is the federal student financial aid programs, both grants and loans. at least for Christian colleges, I think they need to seriously think about the level of dependency they have on those things. But related to that, but a little differently, is to really monitor discounting. That's basically the amount of tuition revenue that's not real money. It's either coming through gift income or through some sort of a simple discount. And then they need to focus on differentiation. That is, not how can we be more like XYZ college down the street, but how can we be entirely differentiated? What's our unique promise? What's our unique selling proposition? And can we deliver well on that promise? And can we, in our messaging, can we show how we're different rather than alike? And then diversification of delivery modalities. And again, I mentioned earlier, not silos of delivery modalities. So yes, we have this online program over here and we have this residential program over here, and you can do one or the other. It needs to be totally integrated, interchangeable, diversified delivery modalities that I think are going to be important for leaders to be successful. So I would say those are some institutional priorities. In terms of presidents themselves and their behaviors, I would say they're going to need to be, maybe to be a little bit repetitive, I would say they're going to need to focus on the governing board. The governing board's going to have to be much better informed and more agile. It's going to be high, it's going to need to be high functioning. And then of course, there's going to need to be the board. Every stakeholder is going to have an exceedingly well-defined, differentiated, mission-driven brand promise and selling proposition. And then there's going to need to be on the part of the board and the administration a really high level of convergent fiscal understanding and margin and contingency. Those are going to be important things.
I think you've hit those spot on.
Thank you.
You brought up two things which are my favorite sayings that I talk to when I speak with university presidents, is the branding and positioning. It's critical. Mm-hmm. You take a look, 98% of all the colleges out there teach the same things.
Right.
And so when I'm talking with a client or a prospective client, I will ask them, what is the one thing that's unique, different, and better about you in the eyes of your customer? And of course, higher ed has three different customers: students, parents, and the people who hire the graduates.
That's right.
In the eyes of the customer versus the competition in the marketplace that has them hiring our graduates or wanting to attend our institution. I mean, that sums it up. And I know of maybe out of the 200 plus Christian higher eds, I think I know 5 who really understand and apply that positioning across every platform. It's got to be ubiquitous on every touch point that your customers must have.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Drum. And I think that's going to be critical to success.
Yeah. The other piece is, you touched on one of my favorite subjects, which is board governance. Mm-hmm. And I have seen so many boards out there who are made up 80 or 90% of pastors. And, I am a member of the National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm a fellow there. And of all the boards that I think people can sit on, whether they be public, private, nonprofit, whatever, I think the higher ed board is the most challenging of all of them, because it touches so many different areas and you have to have expertise from many on there. Mm-hmm. Plus, board governance is changing. And it was a great report that, I can share with you afterwards, that came out from the National Association of Corporate Directors. It's Board Leadership for the Future. And it's talking about 5 things, because everything is changing so fast. You've got to have new kinds of people on the board, and the board has to function differently. I mean, it's just fascinating study.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've made that a priority in ABHE. In fact, we got a substantial grant last year, and we're in the process now of enrolling board leadership cohorts from 48 of our institutions to take them through a pretty rigorous board training and certification process. Our first cohort is almost finished, And we hope it'll be transformational for our institutions. Yeah, we've got work to do on board composition and on board competency, don't we?
Yeah, it's not unique to Christian institutions.
No.
Frankly, I think it's all higher ed institutions are the vast majority, but there's nothing to say that Christian institutions can't lead the way. So you preempted my what are the three biggest takeaways question. So thank you for doing that. Oh, no. So you're retiring from ABHE in the next 6 months or so. What's next for Dr. Enlow?
I have a written, carefully crafted, articulated personal mission statement that's been a guiding North Star for me for quite a long time, and that doesn't change. My role, my employment changes, but my mission is to enhance and accelerate the spiritual, intellectual, and professional formation and fruitfulness of leaders involved in fulfilling Christ's Great Commission. That's my personal mission statement. And I expect to continue to pursue that mission with as much energy and vigor as I have remaining in me all the years that I have. But I'm going to do it in a way that's free from any direct executive responsibility, which I find very liberating. As Gordon MacDonald once said in my presence, I will relieve myself of all forms of institutional power so I can live a life of wisdom. So that'll be the currency that I'm trusting to operate in the years to come. And it'll be some combination of teaching in the non-formal settings or in intensive graduate level courses, writing. I have some books and things that I have in mind. And then influencing through, I'm the chair of a couple boards. I'll be consulting with a couple boards. And then mentoring and coaching leaders. Those are the four big blocks: teaching, writing, influencing, and mentoring, that I expect to continue to be involved in as the energy holds out.
I understand exactly what you mean. And, I want to thank you for all your years of service to Christian higher education and for all that you've done for ABHE. It's very commendable. And, again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much.
You're very kind. Thank you, Drum. And keep up the good work, man.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to the next time we get a chance to chat.
God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening this week, and a special thank you to this week's special guest, Dr. Ralph Enlow, president of ABHE, and for his sharing with us the outlook of Christian higher ed and what presidents need to be doing to keep their institutions viable and sustainable. I also want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Blackbaud. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn about their cloud fundraising, accounting, education management, scholarship, and analytics solutions that are powering some of higher ed's top institutions. Our next guest is Dr. Kathy Trower, president of Trower & Trower, a consultancy that provides governance services to nonprofit organizations. Kathy has studied nonprofit board governance and faculty employment issues, policies, and practices since 1996, and she'll be talking to us about what she thinks boards should be doing during this coronavirus crisis.
This episode of Changing Higher Ed was brought to you by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. Be sure to visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience from admissions to advancement. Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show. We would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.